Picture this. A movie so crazy that even the Queen of England couldn't stop quoting it. A film where the main actor disappeared before it was finished, where legendary directors ran away screaming, and where everything that could go wrong did go wrong. Yet somehow, it became one of the most beloved cult classics of all time. Welcome to the wild, unbelievable world of Flash Gordon from 1980. Today, we're diving into 20 shocking facts that will completely change how you see this crazy space adventure. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why this movie is so much more than just a guy in tights fighting a space emperor. Let's blast off into the madness. Our first fact is about the man who played Flash Gordon himself, Sam Jones. Now, if you looked at Sam Jones, you'd think he was perfect for the role. He was tall, handsome, had that classic hero jawline, and he was even a former Marine. The producers took one look at him and said, "That's our Flash Gordon." But here's where things get really weird. During filming, Sam Jones and the producer, a guy named Dino De Laurentiis, started having some serious problems. They couldn't agree on anything. They argued about how scenes should be done. They had language barrier issues. And the long days of shooting were wearing everyone down. Then something happened during a break in filming that nobody talks about much. Sam Jones got into some kind of fight away from the movie set and ended up in a hospital with injuries. When he came back to finish the movie, something had changed. He was different, and his relationship with the producer was completely broken. Here's the crazy part. Sam Jones refused to come back to do what's called ADR work. That's when actors record their dialogue again in the studio to make it sound better. He also skipped all the promotional events for the movie. He basically just walked away from the whole thing. So what did the movie studio do? They hired a completely different actor to re-record almost every single line that Flash Gordon says in the movie. That means when you watch Flash Gordon, you're looking at Sam Jones, but you're hearing someone else's voice. Most people who watched the movie had no idea that Flash Gordon's voice wasn't really his. It's one of the best-kept secrets in movie history. Our second fact is about the director, Mike Hodges. This guy didn't even want to make Flash Gordon at first. He got brought in late when the movie was already in trouble. But once he started working on it, he had his own vision for what the movie should be. He wanted it to be funny in a smart way, with a kind of controlled craziness that would make people laugh, but also take it seriously. The problem was that the producer had a completely different idea. He wanted it to be bigger, louder, and more over the top. What happened next is like something out of a bad dream. The director slowly got pushed out of making decisions about his own movie. They started changing scenes without asking him. They edited parts of the movie without him being there. By the time they were putting the final movie together, Mike Hodges wasn't even allowed in the room anymore. Nobody officially fired him, but he basically lost control of his own film. The movie you see today is still his work, but it got changed so much that he barely recognized it anymore. Years later, he would talk about Flash Gordon with mixed feelings, proud of some parts but sad about what it could have been. Here's a fact that will blow your mind. Before Star Wars existed, George Lucas desperately wanted to make a Flash Gordon movie. He went to the people who owned the rights to the character and begged them to let him make it. They said no. They completely shut him down. So what did George Lucas do? He went home and started writing his own space adventure story. That story became Star Wars. Think about that for a second. If those people had said yes to George Lucas, we might never have gotten Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, or any of the Star Wars movies. Sometimes getting rejected turns out to be the best thing that ever happened to you. The fourth fact is about how completely unprepared everyone was while making this movie. At first, the actors tried to keep up with all the changes. New scenes were being written, scripts were being rewritten constantly, and sometimes new pages would show up on the set just minutes before they had to film them. The actors had no time to practice their lines or figure out what was happening in the story. Eventually, they just gave up trying to follow the script. They started making things up as they went along, improvising their dialogue, and just hoping it would work out. Some of the actors later admitted they had no idea what the movie was even about while they were making it. But here's the strange thing. All that chaos and confusion actually made the movie better and more fun to watch. One of the most famous scenes in Flash Gordon is when our hero grabs a football and turns what was supposed to be his execution into a crazy game. But here's the secret. Nobody planned that scene. There was no choreography, no stunt coordination, no careful planning at all. The director just told all the actors to go wild and see what happened. They started throwing fruit at each other, tossing guards around, and basically turned the whole thing into organized chaos. Even Brian Blessed, who played Prince Voltan, started shouting out football plays in the middle of the scene like he was a real coach. What could have been a complete disaster somehow became one of the most memorable and fun parts of the entire movie. Speaking of Brian Blessed, our sixth fact is all about this amazing actor who played the Flying Prince with a big voice. Brian Blessed didn't just act in his scenes. He became his character completely. During the battle scenes, he kept making his own sound effects with his mouth. Every time there was a laser blast or an explosion, he'd go pew pew or boom, like a little kid playing with toy guns. The sound engineers begged him to stop because it was making their job impossible. But he wouldn't quit. Take after take, he'd deliver his lines and then follow them up with his own sound effects. They had to redo entire scenes just to get clean audio without his mouth-made explosions. But you know what? That energy and childlike enthusiasm is exactly what made his performance so unforgettable. Our seventh fact involves one of the most respected actors in movie history, Max von Sydow, who played the evil Emperor Ming. This man had starred in serious, artistic films like The Seventh Seal and The Exorcist. He was known for playing deep, thoughtful characters in movies that made you think. So when news came out that he was going to play a cartoon villain in a space adventure movie, people in Hollywood were shocked. The role was everything his previous work wasn't. Silly, theatrical, and completely over the top. At first, Max von Sydow was worried that playing Ming the Merciless might ruin his serious reputation as an actor. He took the job partly for the challenge, but during filming, he had serious doubts. He reportedly hated wearing the elaborate costume, found the whole tone of the movie strange, and sometimes wondered if the entire production was turning into a joke. But something magical happened when the movie came out. Fans absolutely loved his performance. Critics said he was the best part of the whole film. Over the years, his portrayal of Ming became one of his most iconic and beloved roles. Sometimes taking a risk pays off in ways you never expected. Before Sam Jones got the part, Flash Gordon almost looked completely different. The producers considered some big names for the role. Kurt Russell was offered the part, but turned it down because he thought the script was too silly. They thought about Dennis Hopper, but decided his interpretation was too weird even for this strange movie. And get this, they almost cast Arnold Schwarzenegger as Flash Gordon, but they decided against it because nobody could understand what he was saying through his thick Austrian accent. In the end, producer Dino De Laurentiis chose Sam Jones partly because he saw him on a TV dating show. Sometimes the most random decisions lead to the most interesting results. Here's a fact that shows just how ambitious this movie could have been. Before they settled on Mike Hodges as director, producer Dino De Laurentiis made some incredible phone calls. He reached out to Federico Fellini and Sergio Leone, two of the greatest directors in movie history. These weren't just any filmmakers. They were artists who created masterpieces. Both of them had actually read and loved Flash Gordon comics when they were children, so they understood the character. Fellini showed some interest and even had meetings about the project, but the tight schedule and demanding production didn't match his way of working. Sergio Leone got further in the process and actually read the script, but when he saw the direction the producer wanted to take the movie, he politely said no thank you. These directors didn't walk away because Flash Gordon wasn't worth making. They walked away because they could see what it might become under that kind of rush production. And you know what? They were probably right. Flash Gordon didn't become the artistic masterpiece it could have been, but became something else entirely. An unforgettable piece of entertainment. The costumes in Flash Gordon looked absolutely amazing on screen. They were metallic, towering, and completely out of this world. But here's what audiences never knew. Up close, those costumes were falling apart. The armor cracked during scenes, wings tore off, belts broke open in the middle of takes, and helmets fell off actors' heads. But the cast and crew had one rule that kept everything going: never stop filming. If a zipper broke, they'd work it into the scene. If a helmet fell off, they'd pretend it was supposed to happen. Nobody yelled cut. Nobody stopped the cameras. What you see in the final movie is basically a miracle of creative editing and a whole lot of duct tape holding everything together. Brian Bless's commitment to his role as Prince Vultan went way beyond just memorizing lines. When they told him his character could fly, he insisted on actually doing the flying scenes himself. No stunt double, no shortcuts. They rigged him up on wires high above the studio floor, suspended in full costume with wings that weighed almost 40 pounds. The harness dug into his chest painfully, and during one of the early takes, something went terribly wrong. The rigging system failed, and he fell. There was no safety net, no crash mats, just a few crew members in pure luck that prevented what could have been a fatal accident. Brian Bless survived the fall, but it left everyone on the set shaken and scared. But here's the amazing part. He didn't blame anyone, and he didn't quit. He got back into that rigging system, adjusted his heavy wings, and kept on filming. All that wild energy and fearless enthusiasm you see on screen came with real risk, real weight, and real fear. What audiences saw was a man having the time of his life, but what they didn't see was the incredible courage it took to create that performance. Halfway through making the movie, disaster struck in the most unexpected way. A plumbing failure in the studio sent water pouring everywhere. Props got soaked, costumes were ruined, expensive equipment short-circuited and stopped working. Most productions would have shut down immediately to fix the damage and start over, but not Flash Gordon. Instead of stopping, they kept the cameras rolling. An entire scene with a flooded floor and ruined backdrop actually made into the final movie, and most audiences never even noticed because everything else was so crazy already. On the Flash Gordon set, chaos wasn't a problem to be solved. It was just part of the plan. The music for Flash Gordon has an amazing story behind it. Originally, the producer wanted Pink Floyd to create the soundtrack, but Dino De Laurentiis had never heard of Pink Floyd and wasn't interested. Instead, someone handed him a Queen record. He listened to it for about 10 seconds and said, "Get me the Queens." What happened next was pure madness in the best possible way. Queen had only a few weeks to write an entire movie soundtrack while they were still touring around the world. They wrote songs in hotel rooms between concerts, recorded music backstage, and somehow created not just a score, but an anthem that people still sing today. One scene in the movie caused some serious problems with censors around the world. It was supposed to be over the top and campy. A villain's wedding, a helpless bride, and a last-minute rescue. Classic science fiction stuff, play for laughs. But when censors watched the scene, they didn't see camp or comedy. They saw something that felt disturbingly real. Ming's threats toward Dale Arden came across as genuinely scary rather than funny. The dialogue, the tone, and implied violence pushed boundaries that most family movies stayed away from. In several countries, including Ireland and Singapore, the scene was immediately flagged as problematic. Censorship boards debated cutting it entirely. Rating systems pushed for harsher classifications that would keep kids from seeing it. Some countries threatened to block the entire movie unless changes were made. The final version stayed mostly intact in most places, but just barely. For a while, this one scene almost cost the movie its worldwide release. To Western audiences, Flash Gordon was wild, colorful, and over the top in a fun way. But in other parts of the world, it looked like something completely different and much more dangerous. In countries like Singapore and Malaysia, the film ran into immediate resistance. Censors flagged scenes not for violence or bad language, but for symbols, circular patterns, ritualistic costumes, and darkly lit ceremonies. Combined with Ming's godlike presence and cold authority, the imagery reminded them of occultism and black magic rather than harmless science fiction. The movie was banned completely in several regions. In other countries, it was heavily edited or reclassified, pulled from family theaters, and pushed into restricted viewings for adults only. What was meant to be campy fantasy became, in their eyes, something genuinely threatening. It was a clash of cultures and one of the strangest censorship cases in science fiction movie history. Before there was a movie, There was a vision drawn by comic book illustrator Al Williamson. Williamson wasn't just any artist. He helped define what Flash Gordon looked like in the comics for decades. His artwork was elegant, dramatic, and full of incredible detail. He brought a kind of nobility to the character that made Flash Gordon feel more like a mythic hero than a joke. So when the 1980 movie came out, Williamson went to see it with high expectations. He didn't laugh, he didn't smile, and he left the theater in complete silence. The movie's camp tone, loud colors, and one-liners weren't the Flash Gordon he had spent decades drawing and perfecting. To him, the film had missed the heart and soul of the original character completely. He quietly disowned the movie and never spoke positively about it again. For longtime fans of the comics, it was a painful reminder that not every beloved story translates well to the screen, and that sometimes even heroes lose their shape when Hollywood gets hold of them. Here's a fact that explains so much about why this movie turned out the way it did. Producer Dino De Laurentiis didn't speak much English, but when someone pitched Flash Gordon to him, he said yes immediately. He didn't read the full script, didn't understand the tone they were going for, and didn't really know what he was getting into. He just liked the visual concepts he was shown. Every major decision about the movie, the casting, the tone, the music, was made from pure gut instinct rather than careful planning. There was no detailed plan, no careful translation of ideas. Just Dino making choices based on what felt right in the moment. And somehow, that complete chaos is exactly what made the movie what it became. When Flash Gordon opened in American theaters, the reaction was lukewarm at best. Critics didn't know what to make of it, and audiences who were expecting another Star Wars felt completely blindsided by its campy tone and theatrical style. The box office numbers were disappointing, and in the United States, it faded from theaters pretty quickly. But something completely different happened across the Atlantic Ocean in the United Kingdom. British fans embraced everything that American audiences found confusing: the absurdity, the style, and especially the Queen soundtrack. The movie aired regularly on British television, filled poster shops, and became a rite of passage for an entire generation of science fiction lovers. Kids memorized every line, teenagers blasted the songs, and adults found themselves quoting at parties. What flopped in one country became a cultural icon in another. Over time, the UK didn't just keep Flash Gordon alive. They helped turn it into a legend that influenced filmmakers around the world. In a 2020 interview, Brian Bless revealed an incredible secret that sounds almost too good to be true. He claimed that Queen Elizabeth herself once told him she loved Flash Gordon, not just that she had watched it, but that she genuinely enjoyed it, especially his famous line, "Gordon's alive." According to Bless, she told him she would rewatch the movie with her grandchildren during holiday gatherings. There were no cameras present, no official confirmation, just a quiet royal memory passed along years later. It sounds completely unbelievable, but with a movie this strange and wonderful, nothing feels too far-fetched to be true. Not every film gets embraced during its original release, but some grow over the years into something much bigger than anyone expected. Flash Gordon wasn't a critical favorite when it came out, but to a new wave of filmmakers who grew up watching it, it was lightning in a bottle. Director Edgar Wright credits it for shaping his understanding of how music and visuals can work together to drive storytelling. Taika Waititi called it fearless, absurd, and oddly sincere. And James Gunn saw something in it that would later inspire his work on Guardians of the Galaxy. These weren't just casual tributes from other filmmakers. They were actual blueprints for how to make movies. The colors, the sound, the attitude, the willingness to be completely ridiculous while still taking the story seriously. Flash Gordon didn't follow the established rules of filmmaking, and that gave other creative people permission to break those same rules in their own work. Here's our bonus fact, and it's absolutely wild. In the early 1980s, after Flash Gordon found its cult following, producers started floating some crazy ideas for a sequel. The weirdest one was a crossover with James Bond. Yes, you read that right. Flash Gordon meeting 007. The pitch was completely real. They imagined spy gadgets in space, Ming the Merciless facing off against MI6, and some kind of cosmic Cold War between Earth's secret agents and space empires. It never got past the planning phase, but there are actual memos, story treatments, and early sketches that prove this wasn't just someone's fever dream. The idea of two of the most iconic British characters appearing on the same screen sounds absolutely ridiculous, which is probably exactly why it almost happened. In the world of Flash Gordon, ridiculous was just another word for possible. Flash Gordon wasn't supposed to last. It was loud, chaotic, and completely out of step with what movie studios thought audiences wanted to see. The production was a disaster, the release was rocky, and the reviews were mixed. But somehow it stayed with us. Not because it followed a successful formula, but because it didn't follow any formula at all. What began as a risky gamble became something deeply personal for the people who connected with it. The movie succeeded not because of what it achieved technically, but because of how it made people feel. It was bold when it could have been safe, strange when it could have been normal, and completely unafraid when it had every reason to be scared. Those qualities, that willingness to be different, to take risks, to embrace chaos and turn it into art, somehow stay with audiences long after credits rolled. Not every film finds a home in people's hearts, but this one did. It found a place with kids who watched it on Saturday afternoons, teenagers who discovered it on late-night television, and adults who rediscovered it years later with their own children. It became a shared experience, a secret handshake between people who understood that sometimes the most imperfect things are also the most perfect. If Flash Gordon meant something to you, if even one moment from this strange, unforgettable film stayed with you over the years, then you're part of something special. You're part of a community that understands that movies don't have to be flawless to be wonderful, that chaos can create beauty, and that sometimes the best art comes from the biggest disasters. So here's what I want you to do right now. Hit that like button if you enjoyed learning these incredible facts. Share this video with someone who loves weird movie trivia, and subscribe to our channel because we got so many more amazing stories about the movies you love. Tell us in the comments which of these facts surprised you the most, or share your own favorite Flash Gordon memory. Thanks for watching, and remember, Gordon's not just alive in the movie. He's alive in all of us who refuse to let great stories die. Keep watching, keep wondering, and keep believing in the power of pure, beautiful madness.